for
Hi everyone, welcome back to the third episode of Nepalese Intake podcast. Today we have Hellem Pedroso, a very dear friend of mine. She is a project manager slash consultant and has done projects all around the world. She is also a mentor and has been mentoring folks from all around the world. And I'm very excited for you guys to hear from Hellem about how do you turn ideas into projects, how do you find mentor in life, and how do you gain clarity in life, how do you build culture in your organization and things like that. A lot of good stuff's coming in today. I am gonna pass on to Helen and ask her to introduce herself and tell us more about her. Helen.
sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. So yeah, about me, right? First off, super happy to meet everyone, and um, whenever Zolpa asks me to speak, I'm like, yes, right away. Just tell me what you need me to talk about. So very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. About me, I have 12 years of consulting at this point of my life. I started very early on, even before I started working. So back in 2008, I found my first mentor, and that's when I started studying design by myself. I was in high school, and then in 2010, my first year of college, I was already volunteering in different projects. So that's a big part of my life. I'm Brazilian, born and raised, so I was in Brazil doing all of these different things. And then my second year of college, I already got into consulting as an intern with clients from everywhere in the world. So my career kind of started international from there. My third year of college, I worked for an organization called ISIC in the first semester. And then the second semester, I got a scholarship to go to the US and study at Parsons, which is one of the top tier schools of design in the world, in case you are not aware or familiar with it. It's in New York City, so I got to live in New York for a year and study with the best design professionals that I could have ever met in my entire life. Did a lot of different projects, went to China for one of the projects that I was being a research assistant to, and did multiple different things. By the end of my time there, I worked for one big tech consultancy that I love very much, called Thoughtworks. And with them, I got to intern and help three girls who had just won $10,000 to start their startup. So I'm very keen, very close to topics around inclusion of women in technology. So they actually asked me to come back to Brazil and still intern for them in the offices here. So I did my internship, even though they didn't have offices here. And this is before the pandemic and remote work was a big thing, right? So I actually got to spend my last semester of college in Brazil, traveling around Brazil to go to their offices and recruit girls and mentors for the program that the girls have won, which was not a project from Thoughtworks, from an NGO that we had partnership with. And then after that, I got an opportunity to go work for a business that represented legal education in Brazil. And there I was an analyst for innovation culture. And the biggest project that I did there, aside from, of course, starting their innovation culture, which was non-existent, was actually redesigning their entire organizational culture. And this was like a big company sized in the average of like 150 franchises units around Brazil. So it was reasonably big. That was an amazing project. I worked for them for a year, learned a lot. And then after that, I got a proposal. I wrote my first book in Portuguese in a month. And then I got a proposal to go to India to create creative leadership training for middle managers to C-level. And so it was very interesting because you can imagine I was a 20-year-old something, right, talking to this very high level people, and I was like learning so much all the time. It was an amazing experience. Also, of course, like learning about the culture. So I lived in India for 4 months, and it was amazing. I've learned so much from that experience. After that, I came back to Brazil, and then I started working in my home college as a lead for a project and for a consulting agency in California, where I worked for 4 years. I worked for the university for a year. I worked simultaneously at both places as I was doing my postgrad course, which is sort of a master's, but like without the master's degree. It's a thing we have in Brazil. So I had my postgrad in social entrepreneurship. I studied 2 years and a half for it, and my final thesis was around researching aspects of the culture in each continent that would foment and incentivize social entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I delivered that, I took a sabbatical meanwhile in the period, because that's when I realized I was working 20 hours a day for 7 years of my life. So I took a year, and I only did the postgrad for a year or so. And after I actually delivered my final thesis, I went to Starting Block, which is where we met.
Mm-hmm.
And in Starting Block, I got a scholarship once again to go to New York, which was amazing. Had the amazing leadership training. Finally found like a community that I actually resonated with. I've been part of different communities around my life, but Starting Block really was special for me in that sense. And then I came back to the consulting agency in California, worked for them for another 3 years or so, and traveled a lot for work. I traveled to Puerto Rico for projects. I traveled to the US, of course, for projects. Some of the corporate training things that I did on the side also. I went to Argentina, other places in Latin America, like did a lot of traveling in 2018, 19, to the point that like I didn't really know where my toothbrush was at some points of the journey. So that was when I realized that with Starting Block, right, I mentored, I became a Starting Block fellow in 2017, mentored in 2018. And one of my mentees told me, like, you know, with a lot of conviction, like holding my shoulders, he told me, like, you're coming next year, right? And I was like, I don't know. Why are you asking me? And they said, like, no, because we need more mentors like you. And you know, when someone has that conviction and looks into your eyes, so I was like, maybe I'm overlooking something here. If you're seeing all of this, like, why don't I? And so I took some time to think about it. And of course, like in between all of this, I did my TEDx in Amazonia, which is the first time that I, as a Brazilian, have been, which was amazing, to know a little more about my country. And then, you know, after that, I started during my sabbatical, I wrote another book, a little bigger book, actual book. I think the first one was more like a tryout. And then this one was actually a book that I, you know, actually signed up and have all the registration and things. And it was a thing that I did. And then I started mentoring people with that. So when this person told me all of this, right, I was like, okay, it's been 2 years that I've been sort of mentoring as a hobby. Maybe there's something here. So in 2019, I left the consulting world. I still do consulting. I left that consulting agency because I wanted to start my own company. So I started doing consulting in my own company. And I started doing a lot of consulting and training and try to figure out the mentoring side of things, because I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. So I think it took me a good 2 years to warm up to the concept of me being an entrepreneur. And now it's been 3 years that I have the company. And yeah, we have a small team of 3 people. We run operations worldwide. I have clients everywhere. Mostly in Asia and the Americas. But yeah, actually now we have people in Europe too. So anyhow, people everywhere. They're always traveling too. So I never know where to go. You know, I never know. I know where they're from. I never know where they are. So yeah, it's super fun. I do a lot of more mentoring now, and I'm just working on my crowdfunding campaign for my next book, which is going to be the first book that I'm going to publish in English. So that's exciting. It's going to happen by the end of the year. And that's a little bit about me.
Very cool, very cool. So it's very interesting, you know, like, so you started with where you initially started your career. You talked a lot about where you started your career, and then we got a very good glimpse of like where you are now and like what you did over the process, over the time. So the key theme in your life, the key word I feel like is design, right? Because you have been designing organizations, you have been designing people's life. So for the members who are listening and we're young and we're trying to build a career, what do you want to tell them about designing your career?
So there's a little story
Uh-huh.
about it that I would like to introduce, because then you can do this about anything else in your life, right? So when I first got to Parsons, this professor that I ended up being a research assistant afterwards, this person got into, freshman first week, everyone is speaking for hours, for 7 days, it was a lot. And then this person speaks for like a minute, and I'm like, who are you? And what they say is legit, and I quote, like, if you're here and you think a diploma from the school, which, it's pretty much like Harvard-ish of design schools. If you think a diploma from the school is going to make you a great designer, you're wrong. So at this point, you can imagine, like, everyone is like, what? Like, the entire audience is in silence. And then he says, if you want to be a great designer, you need to find out what design means to you, not clients, not teachers, not professors, not your bosses, to you. Figure out how you want to put it out in the world and put it out in the world, because if you don't, it's just going to be a bunch of ideas that's not going to matter. So for me, right, at this point I was super nerdy. Like, I could tell you back and forth, like, all design books, authors, like I knew everything by heart. So I think, of course, I went into crisis, went to therapy to figure it out. And the thing that I think was very special about this was he reminded me that I could design what design meant to me. And if you look up the meaning of the word design comes from the word designum in Latin, which means to designate meaning. So you're right, the key word is design, because even I usually say there's two types of people in the world: the ones that know they are designers and the ones that are yet to find out. Because I think even before I saw myself as a designer and I identified as such, and even after I graduated from design school, I didn't identify myself as a designer for a long time. I identified myself as a project manager, as a consultant. And it's not about that piece of it. I think it's really about the enabling piece of it, where it's the kind of reminder that you can design, you can designate meaning around your career. You don't have to fall into other people's labels. Something that I usually tell my mentees is to look around on LinkedIn for job descriptions and see how often the title of the job description will change, but the description will be the same. So as long as you're looking for that job description to fit into it, you didn't really get it. Because the real thing is, if you know what you like and you can match what you like with the job description, then you're going to have what you need. It's really not about the title of the job. It's really about finding something that you will love to do regardless of where you are. Of course, unless it doesn't like hurt your values. I'm not saying that, like, if you're like a Mormon, don't go work somewhere like that there's coffee or alcohol or something that, like corrupts your values or something. Respect your values. All I'm saying is, like, know what you like and where your standards of integrity are before you just go around applying to a bunch of things, like, or even exposing yourself to different projects, right? I feel like sometimes it's so easy for us to think about, oh yeah, this is a marvelous, groundbreaking idea. But then have you thought through the process of, like, do you want to be the person who is going to push this through, who is going to build this into a reality? Because that's the thing. A lot of times when you're starting your career, you're going to do projects and you're not going to be paid to be the manager of the project in a company, right? You're just going to do it because you want the experience. You want to build a portfolio. You want to have, an opportunity to develop. And that's great. I feel like I'm not pro unpaid labor in any shape or form, but I am very grateful for the volunteering opportunities that I had, because that made me just build up and escalate my entire skill set so much earlier in my career, which is not something that I think everyone has to do. I don't think you need to grow fast. You can grow at your own pace. I just happen to like to grow fast. Not anymore, but I used to. So I feel like there is a lot in that realm of, like, if you're gonna design, you have the power to design your career. You have the power to design your profession. You have the power to design the realm of things that you want to intertwine and play around with. So for me, for example, that would be creative leadership, which is within the whole strategic design realm. It would be organizational culture, which is within the organizational development piece, and innovation, which includes social entrepreneurship, impact, all of these different aspects of innovation, right? So for me, that's my kind of little triad. And I love everything about them. And the thing that I think it's important for people to understand when they're designing their career, designing their or the realm that they want to be in, is to keep yourself open, because you never know, right? What project, what company, what opportunity you may feel like it's a match to you. So remember that you're designing your entire career one step at a time. You don't have to design the 20 years ahead of you
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So having that power and like looking through like where your values align with and exposing yourself to those opportunities and projects. So what do you, what kind of like tools and techniques do you recommend in, you know, finding those values? Like when I did the mentorship, we had those diagrams through which I was able to get a lot of clarity on, like, you know, it was not about what I wanted to do in my career. It was not very specific, but it was like, okay, these are my values. So for people who might or might not have access to the techniques that you have, what do you recommend them in like finding clarity? Let's say someone in college or in high school.
Yeah, so actually, all of my tools will be accessible to anyone in Portuguese and in English in the internet for free by October, mid-October.
Okay.
So that will be out there for anyone who wants to use them. But going back to your questions, like what are other tools maybe that we can do? And there are, in my tools, just for people to understand, I work with three main focuses, which is the personal aspect of you, the professional aspect of you, and the relational aspect of you. So it can give you a very holistic understanding of who you are. So that's that, just for context, because you were mentioning, and maybe people are not getting it because they can visualize what it is. So some of the tools that I think can be helpful for people, and even were inspirational for me in my process, I just didn't really align with them 100%. For example, there's so many. There is the Ikigai, which is a Japanese originated four circle type of Venn diagram, where you can find your passion, your mission, your what else? The things that you love doing, the things that people will pay you to do, like different aspects of yourself. I don't 100% align with the vision of some pieces of it, but it's a really good tool. It took me a lot of time to sit with that tool to understand that even I had some different understandings, but I know a lot of people who use it and it's super helpful. So that's a place that I would recommend people to go. There's also the Golden Circle from Simon Sinek, which there is a TEDx, there is a book about Ikigai too. So super accessible. Like if you just search Ikigai, if you just search Golden Circle or start with why, it's the name of his book, you're going to find it super easy. And, you know, the Golden Circle is going to help you to understand why, how, and what you want to do things in your life, right? And how to position yourself in such a way. I usually like to recommend that kind of framework for positioning yourself in interviews or, you know, to other stakeholders in your project and things like that. If you're building up a project, it's important for you to know the why, the how, and the what of your project too. So it's very flexible as a framework, and I think it's super helpful. Something else that I think some people use, I've never used it, but something that I've heard good things about is there's a business canvas thing that people use for their businesses projects, right? It's one tool that's a page with boxes that you fill in, like stakeholders, products and services and different aspects of your business plan, right? But in a synthesized one-pager kind of way. So I really like diagrams, frameworks, types of things, because I think they help you visualize things. So there is Business Canvas, which can be helpful for projects. And there's also something called Business Canvas U, which is for personal development. It's a very large book that you can have different aspects of things there. So it's a whole instruction manual type of thing that you can do. Those are the three that I think are the most proeminent that come to mind. I also think that if you're talking about like professional values, there are some tests that helped me a lot with understanding all of those things. there is the Strength Finder from the Gallup Institute
Mm.
that helps you understand your strengths, is based in positive psychology. And basically, what the Institute did with the Strength Finder test was map out the strengths, meaning abilities, right? Skill set types of things that human beings have. And what they will do in their test is rank them in the ones that you're most skilled to the ones that you're less skilled. And their
Okay.
entire focus is by telling you like how you can nourish, how you can develop the ones that you're already strong in.
Okay.
So that's a really good one in my opinion.
Mhm.
Another one that I think it's very helpful is called Barrett Values.
Okay.
Um, Barrett Values is also from a very renowned institute that does a lot of research around different aspects of values and social interactions and things like that. And the Barrett Values test, what they will help you with is understanding. They have sort of a pyramid that is kind of in the direction of a Maslow pyramid
Okay.
dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
and they will help you understand where your values are in that pyramid. And each level of that pyramid will have different levels of interaction with yourself, with other people. There's different aspects that they explore there, and they will explain to you and give you exercises and reflections on how to practice those values according to what is valuable to you. So that's another one. The third test that I want to recommend is called the VIA character.
Okay.
And what VIA character did was map all the possible values of a human being that they could have. And what they do is kind of the strength finder. They will rank the ones that are stronger to you in the top. So you will know how much you value each one of the things, all of the 34 or something values that a human being can have. And the importance of that is like for you to understand, like if I already value creativity, for example, right? How can I develop that? How can I be more creative and use that in my profession, right? So there's a lot of different things that they explore there. All of these websites will have a lot of things for you to explore, a lot of different tips, exercises, reflections. So that's why I like them, because they will not just give you like this is your thing. They will tell you like this is how you can develop that too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
those are the
Yeah. So for me, it's very interesting to learn that, like, I remember being in college and like being wondering like what major do I choose, what do I do with my life, and like knowing that you actually have this well researched ideas and frameworks and techniques that you can use to find clarity. I think that's going to be really valuable for folks who might be watching this
yeah.
watching this content later. So I wanted to talk more about, like, we talked about, how do you find clarity on what you want to do, what
Mhm.
projects you want to build, or like what kind of jobs you want to create. I want to bring focus into the project part. Once you have an idea of like, okay, this is what I want to do, how do you
Mhm.
turn it into a reality? It could be like a tech idea. Hey, I want to build this product. How do you
Mhm.
lead it? How do you lead the project in a way that it is sustainable and is able to meet the goals of stakeholders?
So I think when you're talking about projects, the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that I think it's super important for you to understand is something that one of my mentors taught me very early on, even before I got into design school. And he told me that every design project that you have is like a child, in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that you don't raise a child for you, you raise them for the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you start a project understanding that or coming from that space, it's a lot easier for you to design, because here's what happens, right? A lot of people do projects on the side, they're personal projects,
Mm-hmm.
they're like portfolio purpose type of things. And when you're doing projects with that in that realm, usually what happens is that people tend to derive their sense of value out of the success or failure of the project, and that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the easiest way for you to fail into a project. So that's why I want to make sure that the mindset is set, because if you get into a project thinking that if this is not successful, I'm a bad human being and I'm never going to be like, that's the easiest way for the project to never come into fruition,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not about the project, it's about you. It's like projecting your expectations of your child into the child, and the child is a different human being, you know. So I feel like if you can understand that when an idea comes up into your head, it's an idea. A project is going to have to be in the world and grow. And of course, you're going to help them learn how to walk and sort of get through. But eventually, they need to grow by themselves. Like by themselves, meaning like they need to have some level of independence of who you are related to the project, right? So, and then of course, eventually they can become businesses or NGOs or like some sort of more robust format, right? But that's the thing. If you understand that a project is eventually going to become a bigger thing and not just a little project anymore, that's how you really get into the mindset, because then you can get into the project thinking like, okay, what did we learn with this test? How do we reiterate? How do we shift? How do we move to the beta to 2.0 version? You know, how do we grow this? And that's really important, because when we're talking about a project, of course, I think I'm not going to tell anyone here to start a business right away. Do a project, you know, test it out. Start before you go into like building an LLC or anything. Just put your feet in the water. Don't throw yourself up in the pool type of situation. So, but have that in mind. Have that goal in mind. So if you want for it to grow into like what, a startup, a unicorn, I don't know, whatever kind of thing you want it to grow into, have that, you know, because that's going to guide your decisions, which I think is also pretty important. I feel like a lot of people start projects thinking like, let me see how this is, I don't know, which is okay. But if you really want the fruition part of the project, it's important for you to have dreams about it. You know, and have ambition around it, which is fine. You don't have to be an asshole about it. You can be a good person and be ambitious, you know?
Yes, so I think a lot of the message is finding a balance between, you know, I want to do good, I want something to come out of it, but if it doesn't, then it's okay.
Yeah, here's the good part about the if it doesn't piece of it. If this project doesn't turn out the way I expected, because let's put it out there, it's just that it didn't turn out the way you expected it to. You've learned.
Yeah.
You still learned.
Yeah.
So now that it's like serial entrepreneurial situations.
Yeah.
For serial entrepreneurship to be a thing, an entrepreneur has to do like many businesses for one to go right.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with projects. The one that didn't go the way you expected, and I'm putting this in quotations because like it's a matter of perspective. What is failure here? How are you defining the didn't go right piece of it, right? So if you can see projects as like this space, this laboratory space for you to learn how to make projects work, it doesn't matter what project you're doing, because that's your goal, is to learn how to make the project come to fruition. If you come with that mindset, you're going to be a person who's going to be doing multiple projects, starting different types of things, because that's the thing. It's not about the project. It's about you developing that skill. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I think for us, starting projects and like, you know, being in an early stage of like getting into like creating something new out of our skill sets and building on that, like understanding that it is not the end of the world if this one does not work, is very important, because especially in our society, if you make a mistake, it is taken as an end of the world.
Yeah,
I think in the US that is very different. Like people here are very entrepreneurial, but back home, I don't know how it is in Brazil though.
I feel like there is something about the mistake piece that is that comes across a lot. I feel like there are places who are very developed on the educational piece that can be a little more flexible. But I do think that there is something about being an adult and making mistakes that it's kind of across all cultures in the world, you know?
Okay.
Like it's okay for a kid to make a mistake, but as long as you're over age, it's going to be like, okay. You know, there is some judgment around it everywhere, I think. And I feel like that's the thing. You can kind of subside, like, you know, go into that culture, or you can just say that doesn't work for me. I'm going to create another culture. And actually, if you think about it, all of the very creative, successful, like big names, right? Mistakes are actually a gift.
Yeah.
If you know, when people talk about growth mindsets and that kind of thing, like they understand mistakes as learning opportunities. They don't see that as like a rigid, let me judge myself now opportunity, right? They are learning, and they understand that they're learning. And as long as they're growing, which is like with mistakes, you are forced to grow. You are forced to grow. So if you understand that, mistakes are actually the best thing that can ever happen to you. Because let me tell you something. If you succeed, it's going to be a lot less likely that you're going to learn. Because you're just going to like, okay, let me just repeat the same thing. And repeating things is usually a bad idea, because if you're doing the same thing in a different project or in a different niche or context, right? You need to at least adjust a little bit. You cannot just copy, paste, repeat. So that's the thing. When you make mistakes, you learn how to look out for nuance. You learn how to adjust. You learn all those different aspects that, like, when you succeed, you will know how to sort of repeat in an adjusted way that's going to help you learn and grow faster. So mistakes are actually a good thing. I actually celebrate my mistakes.
There you go. I do too. So high five.
High five.
So I want to shift the focus towards building tech products, which you have done a lot of. Yeah. So if you have a tech idea related to a tech product, how do you bring it to the world? Because like a lot of us in the tech world, we are kind of detached from reality, I would say, because like there's so much power to what we can create. Like, you know, if you look at like AI and machine learning kind of stuff, there's a lot of conversations about, you know, it affecting the society. So how do you build human-centric tech products? And how have you done that in your career?
That's a really good question. I think there's a few pieces here. It's really easy for you to lose sight of the core and the goal of a project and a product if you're developing it, if you stop talking to your user.
Okay.
It's very easy. So something I always tell designers, especially designers, but everyone in life, I say, assumptions are not your friends.
Okay.
And that's where I feel things start to derail. So you know, when you're like in a room and someone says, maybe we should do some research about this. And someone says, no, we know everything. I'm like, you know everything?
Yeah.
Please enlighten me. Please. I mean, who are you?
Yeah.
Are you like the Google God or whatever? Like, who are you? Because that's the thing. I feel like when you start to be too confident about what you know about your user, be careful. That's dangerous. That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
So I think more than just like having a customer success, good relationship with your user, it is super important for you to be curious about what your user needs. And here's the thing, of course, your user may want different things from you because you're already solving something, so they want a different solution, and like they will open a big branch of opportunities. Then it's up to you to say, like, no, this is our focus, this is our business model. Like, of course, you know, it's up to you to make those decisions. But I really think that like bringing a product into the world is more than just the product itself. And that's where I feel like a lot of people get lost, because it's, so for example, AI, whatever, digital products in whatever realm, okay? Tech is serving us, human beings. As long as you remember that and you talk to people and you ask questions and you remain curious, you know, the human-centered, of course, there's like, if you look it up, you're going to see so many courses, like from IDEO, from Acumen, from all of these types of design institutes, right? In Interaction Institute, so many places that you, like Coursera types of things. You can go anywhere, like even YouTube tutorials for free on the internet. So, and a lot of amazing people talking about it and keynotes. That's very accessible, right? Even on iTunes University,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of amazing classes around this topic,
Mm-hmm.
which is totally for free.
Okay.
And the thing that I think is super important is for you to remember that you can know all of the tools in the world. If you lack curiosity on how people are using your product or how the product is serving people, there's no point for you to continue doing anything. There's zero point at all, because then you may focus on like the business model or all the other things, but if you're not looking at your client, it's going to take very little time for you to lose the ones that you have and get out of the market very quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the innovation process, right? When you have a very successful company that doesn't want to do anything else and just stop innovating or stop looking at their clients in general, that's when you see things fail, like going down super fast. So for me, that's the big thing. You can, and another problem that I would definitely look out for is the, I say it's the paradigm of agile methodologies. So for example, agile as a thing, as if you read the manifesto, the agile manifesto, you're going to see principles of how people want to guide projects
Mm-hmm.
in an agile way, in a way that makes them learn fast. So it's principles. You can apply them however you want,
Mm-hmm.
right? The place where it gets complicated is when like you look at a design sprint or a scrum, or like, there's different tools that you can use, or even project management like approaches to things, and you want to do them by book. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is how we're going to do this,
Mm-hmm.
all of the steps, all of the things, and sometimes not all of them are applicable to your situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like sometimes a lot of people are just checking things out of a list to make products happen. Like, let's do one design sprint and get a product out in a week. And I'm like, dude, you can get a prototype out. So let's align expectations here. Like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's the thing too. Understand the principles. Don't get attached to use the tools. Get to know the tools and know how to use them. Don't be imprisoned to them just because it is the format of the tool. You can be creative and use them in the way that fits your situation better, in a way that helps you serve your client, that is in a human-centric way. I feel like discernment is a big tool. It's the biggest of tools. If you don't have discernment, you're just going to be doing things for the sake of doing things. And when you're working with people, empathy is necessary. Listening actively is necessary. Being curious is necessary. Otherwise, you're just going to be people pleasing your user, which is not the point. When you're designing a product, you really want the product to enhance someone's quality life, or like, I don't know, solve a problem. There's different goals to this thing. And if you lose track of that, is where I think it gets very complicated.
Really interesting. So having that vision and like constantly reiterating on it. So I think this is where it gets interesting. Like we use a lot of like agile methodology and scrum and things like that in tech while building a product. I
Yeah.
didn't know that they were like an actual design principle and it was just being used in tech, and you can actually implement it outside of tech too while you are managing products. So that's new to me.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I think the Agile Manifesto was born in tech, and then the human-centered design piece was born in design,
Okay.
and they overlap in a very harmonious way. Um, I see a lot of those worlds integrating, not even colliding, just really integrating. And even though they're very different, I never did the test, but I would be interested in seeing like matching them, because the principles, like the core of it, is very similar.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we see them together a lot. I don't think anyone is like trying to match them, but that's why we see them a lot, because it's like, when people identify with you, you get close to each other kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think we had a good rundown of like how do you find clarity on like what you want to work on, and like
Mm-hmm.
the methodologies on how we can actually build them and the frameworks that we can use. So I want to shift the conversation towards connection and mentorship. You
Mm-hmm.
have been mentoring me for, I think it's been 7, or I think it's been around 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Around
Something
since
like that.
my yeah, since my freshman sophomore year. So, and I think a lot of us, when we are starting out early in the career, we are seeking for mentors in the field of our interest or even outside the field of our interest. So how do you usually find, how do you build connection with your mentees?
Mhm. I think the basis for connection is caring.
Okay.
Care. Care is the word for me.
Uh-huh.
I cannot mentor someone that I don't care deeply about.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, there will be people
Mm-hmm.
that I will meet, and even though they will identify with me in a certain level, um, I will notice, for example, that they're just looking at the LinkedIn version of me,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
image of like me in front of a TED audience or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something I'm interested in sometimes because I'm a human being.
Mm-hmm.
For me to be there, there's so much more,
Mm-hmm.
for that to happen or something like that. So I feel like sometimes I have declined mentees before because that's the thing for me. If I don't care for you deeply, I'm the kind of person that I will text my mentees in whatever hour of the day if I find a resource that I think is going to be helpful for them.
Yeah, she does
Um,
that.
so
And
that's
it's actually very
exactly,
helpful.
yeah, right. So that's the thing for me. It's like that relationship is based on how much I care about them, right? And I'm not saying that I don't care about people. I kind of care about everyone. It's just like it's not everyone that I'm gonna do that for, or like I will have in my head as often to remember. And I would rather let them go and find that in someone else,
Yeah,
than just because you think there's something here. I feel like it's like any other relationship. What I say about relationships is that it takes two to tango. No one dances tango by themselves.
yeah.
So it's a two-way street. And I feel like my mentees care deeply about me. I care deeply about them. And, of course, there's all the professional aspects of it. There's all of that. But there is an aspect of me that admires and respects them as human beings for that relationship to have a strong basis. And I think it's not that I don't admire and respect other people. It's just I don't admire and respect them in the same way. It's not because, it's not because you can respect and admire someone that you actually want to have a relationship with them. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So that's the main key aspect for me. Something else I think is super important for me in mentoring is long-term relationship. For me, like whenever I take someone into a mentoring dynamic with me, I make sure they understand that like I'm in this for the long run. And usually something I said is like, I'm holding your hand and I'm only gonna let go if you keep me out. Like you're gonna have to tell me like get out of my life, which I will be keen to do if that respects your boundaries.
Yeah.
But I want you to know that like I'm not going anywhere unless you don't want me here anymore.
Yeah.
So that's something. Go ahead.
Go on.
Go on.
So I was just curious, those are like your thoughts on how you would go about building that relationship with mentors. Do you have like a particular mentor that you build a deep relationships with, and do you want to talk about that, how
All of
that
them.
formed?
All of them. So here's what I think about like my mentors and finding a mentor. I have had people that I have considered mentors for a short period of my life, and I have had mentors long-term relationship type of deal, which is my personal preference. Personally speaking, that's kind of mentoring I want to have with my mentees. Of course, I have mentored people for short periods of time. I've done it. Throughout the years, and after mentoring over 200 people around the world, what I found for myself is that I would rather invest in those long-term relationships because that's what I want instead of just a short-term thing. So how do you find that, right? I don't think every mentor is going to think the same way that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you go into like, there is a design.org platform that offers free mentoring, for example. Like there's different mentoring platforms out there nowadays. So I feel like if you go into that, you will see that there are different mentors and they can offer you different things. So, but those mentorships that I've seen online and all of that, they're very professional based. So like you're looking for a job, resume, portfolio review type of thing, like very sort of even transactional sometimes. Whereas I am interested in like seeing you through your career. Most of my mentees have leadership potential, don't really acknowledge, eventually become leaders, and I'm like, yeah, we're on the same page now. So, I feel like most of the time, a lot of the people that I mentor, they lack confidence in themselves, and I can see that early enough that I will believe in them before they do. So there is a very specific types of thing that I look forward for. But for example, I have like my first mentor. We still talk to each other like 15 years. And it's the longest mentorship relationship that I have. And I adore the man, like adore him. He has seen me through high school, college, going to the US, all of other things that I have done. Everything I just said, right? Everything. He's seen me grow, and he was the person who told me the first time, like, you're a leader. And I'm like, not way, no way in hell. Like, that's not a thing. And look at me now, right? So I feel like there is so much about how my mentor shaped me too. So there is that mentor. I have a business mentor. That another funny story, right? First time I talked to him, he was a professor in my postgrad, and I come to him and I'm like, so I think you're pretty much a jerk, but I have questions. So here are my questions. And then after that, we actually developed a beautiful relationship. And now he's like my entrepreneurship business model, like all business related things mentor. Also like someone I deeply admire personally from his story. Like he's overcome things that I cannot even imagine. I learn every single time I talk to him personally and professionally. It's someone that I literally adore. So, and of course, many of my bosses were my mentors too. Many of those relationships are not as long term, a lot more shorter types of things. That doesn't mean that they are less valuable. Let's put it this way. I feel like all types of mentoring that I have ever experienced are meaningful in that moment, and I've learned from them, even from the mentors that I don't talk to anymore for whatever reason. I feel like having them in that period of time was so very helpful. So I think for people listening and they're confused about how to find a mentor or something, you need to know what you need from a mentor first. That's the thing. Like, know what you're asking for, what you need, and start that relationship by saying, like, a lot of times I will tell my mentees, just ask the person to be your mentor. Like someone at work that you admire that you don't work directly with, ask them to be your mentor.
Yeah.
It's not such a complex situation that you need to like apply or like, most of the times all you need to do is ask. And if the worst that's gonna happen, they're gonna say no. Yeah. That's the worst. But if you don't ask, you're never gonna know. So I feel like, but that's the thing, right? Sometimes the way you approach the mentor has a lot to do with the outcome you're gonna have. So if you come with a lot of clarity on what you need, so they can tell you if they can help you or not, that's super helpful. And in starting a mentoring relationship. So that's, I think, the first step. And I would definitely recommend, like, if you see like 10 people in a list that you would like to be mentored by, ask all of them. There is no one telling you like you can only have X amount of mentors. You can have as many as you want. Go for them.
Yeah. So beginning that conversation.
Yeah.
And having that intention. So I wanted to talk about, I wanted to hear more about Thoughtworks. You mentioned them, and you also mentioned helping a few women build a startup in New York. So I want to hear more about that experience and how it was like.
Beautiful. One of the best working experiences I have ever had. I haven't worked with Thoughtworks in like, I think almost 10 years, and still love them very, very much. Like, it's one of the best companies in any niche that I have ever worked with. Amazing culture, amazing people, worldwide, super inclusive, humane, so innovative, amazing. So basically, I was recruited to be part of this. I was doing a lot of grad classes when I was in the US, even though I was in my undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
So they were recruiting grad students, and I did one of the interviews, and I ended up being recruited, and I worked in this project for like a week. And because I said in the interview that I was very keen about social entrepreneurship, social impact, social design, they had a coworker of mine was a mentor in this program called Technovation Challenge, which is from an NGO that, Thoughtworks were part. The mentors, so anyone can be a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women who were at Thoughtworks were mentors in this program. And I don't know exactly how it is now, but at the time it was just for high school girls.
Mm-hmm.
I think now there is something for university, like undergrads. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but back in the day it was like this. And then this was back in 2013, so it's been a minute. And what happened was my colleague couldn't be with the girls because she was always out in the client,
Mm-hmm.
working with different clients. And so I was going to be in the office, right, because it was an intern. And so they told me, since you like all of this and you like impact and all of that, and you want to help the girls and look out for them and support them as they're developing their product.
Mm-hmm.
It was a digital product, and they were starting their startup. And so like, sure. So I was 20 something. I don't think I was 21 back then even. And it was the most interesting process because I have never started a company back then. Right now I have my own company, but back then I was clueless about the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was super, I learned so much, and it was interesting because I needed to learn so I could teach them, right? So I was helping them to rehearse sales speeches, and they went to give interviews at Bloomberg, and they were selling things in 3 months, like a summer period, right? 3 months they had a prototype working, and they could sell contracts, and they were negotiating, and it was amazing to just see all of that happen, right? And incorporating a company and like all of those things. And they were 15 years old. It was 3 girls that I loved to death, and still admire them because
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing to me to see such young women
Mm-hmm.
starting their companies and going, they were still in high school, so it's not like they didn't have any other things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing for me to see them just engage with that and really pull it through like in 3 months. So yeah, I have that entire experience very close to my heart.
Okay. So how did you go about, did they have like some kind of idea? What kind of support did you provide to them?
So for the competition, they had already have a low fidelity prototype,
Okay.
which was approved in the competition. It was working, but it was very low fidelity. It
Okay.
wasn't a functioning product.
Okay.
It was a very raw prototype.
Okay.
So what we did, because Thoughtworks had a lot of developers and different types of experts, I remember we would have like a lot of different people come in and out and helping the girls with the code and the interface and all of these different things. So we would have like this after hours pizza parties where everyone would come and pitch in and co-create the thing with the girls and like just bring in all of their different aspects. So we would have a business analyst, we would have a software engineer, we would have all of these different expertises coming together to help the girls like throughout their development. So of course they were 15, so they didn't really know a lot of software development or anything back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
But they were learning, and they learned super fast to the point that like in 3 months with the help of everyone, there was
Yeah.
something working. So
Very interesting. It's great that they had the support.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't even know what kind of support you need. So
Yeah.
having that information is really helpful. So I wanted to talk more about, we talked about turning ideas into a project, and we also talked about such an example, right? So let's say those girls were to go about and build their own organization. What
Mhm.
messages do you have for young entrepreneurs who are building an organization on how you can build the culture there?
Interesting. So, for early on stage organizations or
Mm-hmm.
any sized organizations,
Mm-hmm.
there's one basic rule that I think anyone, everyone, not just everyone needs to know this. Culture, this is something a lot of people say, and I'm going to say my piece on it. So, for me, culture is tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
What people usually say is that culture is a reflex of the CEO, and I agree with that because who builds up tolerance levels? Who are people looking out to see, like, yeah, if the CEO is doing it, then I'm going to do it too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's why I say culture is
Mm-hmm.
tolerance because sometimes people won't let themselves lead by the CEO. Sometimes they're admiring or feel the sense of leadership from someone else. So I feel like tolerance levels are something that everyone can do. And the leadership piece is interesting because I'm not talking about a position, I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about a relationship because leadership is about trust.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is not about the title that you have. And when I mean trust, is like building trust relationships with people that you work with. That's
Okay.
what leadership is to me.
Okay.
Um, so when you're talking about this, you don't have to be a manager to have this.
Mm-hmm.
You can have that in any job title you have, right? And that's usually when people promote you to management.
Mm-hmm.
Like, magically, it just happens like that. So I feel like there's so much about culture that surrounds behavior in the sense of people don't acknowledge as much as they could how their tolerance levels build up the culture that they're in. I think it's so easy for people to say, oh, yeah, I don't know culture, or it's not my culture. I just came in here and it's all shit and I'm just trying to survive. I understand that. But whenever you position yourself, you respect yourself, people see you honoring yourself, it's going to be very likely that they're going to trust you because you're being consistent with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I think is super important for any kind of entrepreneur at any stage to know is that, especially if you're the CEO of anything, like if you're the starting person, founder of anything, you are the core of the culture. It is your responsibility to show other people what is tolerable or not. It is your responsibility to reinforce the values in every decision you make and how you show up and how you talk to people. It's in the little things. I feel like a lot of people think, oh, yeah, I'm going to speak to the entire company now. Let me put on my culture suit. But then in individual meetings, you're a jerk. Like, it's just going to show, it's inconsistent. You see what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
inconsistent people are not trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
Our human brains work like that, right?
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
see inconsistency in behavior, you're going to think you're either lying to me or what is this about?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what is the issue here?
Yeah.
So I feel like there is so much about culture that is easy. It's in the small things, like talk to people as they're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Super simple.
Mm-hmm.
Not asking all that much.
Yeah.
Respect your values, respect other people.
Mm-hmm.
Have conversations. Learn how to be the container and how to hold space
Mm-hmm.
for people to grow and develop themselves.
Yeah.
Learn how to build up recruitment value based processes
Mm-hmm.
that are going to help people that have the same values and character that are aligned with you come in and then help them grow and develop their skill set. Of course, there are specific situations where you may need super fast results. Hire a freelancer. Don't hire people to be in your team for quick fixes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's no value alignment, there is another entire problem there.
Yeah.
So know your values.
Mm-hmm.
Know the kind of company you're building.
Mm-hmm.
Understand the culture you want to build and do that every day in everything you do. Every single decision, every single conversation, every email you read, every message you reply, those are opportunities for you to build culture. Culture is not something that happens overnight. It happens over time. And the more you do it every day, the more consistent you are, the more people are going to see it, and then they're going to learn what culture is about for you. That's my take on this.
Okay. Okay, I think that's gonna be very valuable for. There's a lot of, I mean, you have worked in India, right?
I have.
So I think there's a lot of like similarity in the work culture in terms of like hierarchy.
Hmm.
But I think that conversation is changing and people are being more empathetic.
I feel like there is pieces to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have friends who are in India
Mm-hmm.
working for companies outside of India.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the work culture in most places in India are very complex
Mm-hmm.
due to historical, like social culture kinds of other things. But the one thing that I will tell you is there is an office in Bangalore of
Mm-hmm.
Thoughtworks.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughtworks has offices over India.
Mm-hmm.
And one could argue that like Thoughtworks has a very open-minded kind of American culture.
Mm-hmm.
Not true. Because values go across cultures. It's not about the context that you're in, it's about the values that you have. And values, they don't have a country.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings have value wherever they are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there are people who align with very aggressive competitive cultures because they are competitive.
Mm-hmm.
There's no problem with that. Just find something that aligns with that. Go on, move on with your life.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who are not competitive, who are co creative, who are flexible, who don't like rigid, like traditional feeling kinds of rigidity. Go work for like a creative company. You know, there's so many of them. Like, think about it. Like, IDEO is one. Like, there's so many design places, anything in the creative industry, right? There's so many, like, advertising. There's so many places you can go. You can go into like a Google type of culture where people are more creative, right? Because they're always thinking about innovation and la la la. Whereas if you look at an accounting company, people can have a more rigid structure because they need it. They need it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make it work, right?
Mm-hmm.
They cannot account for like flexibility because they need to follow rules. That's like accounting is very rigid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course there are super cool like accounting companies out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are like tech companies that are rigid or flexible. You see, like it's not about your niche, it's not about where you are in the world, it's about your values.
Mm-hmm.
There are people in all niches with flexible and rigid structures in their cultures. And no one is right or wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of alignment. That's all.
So the next question for you, how do you find that alignment?
In the interview, in
Okay.
the interview.
Okay.
So, something I think it's super important for people to understand is there are a few ways that you can map out or test, put your feet in the water, get a feeling of how things are. So, first of all, if you really want to work somewhere, right, and you want to understand the culture, go on LinkedIn, find people who have similar job titles, even if it's not in the same country as you're applying to, and send them a message and say, hey, I'm applying to this job. I wanted to see if I was a match with this company. Could you please talk to me about how you feel, how you're developing your career? Could you give me a little more insight? Because I would like to know that before I apply.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. Or if you are in an interview with HR or the person who's going to be your boss or your colleagues, ask them, how is your experience so far? How have you been developing your career here? How do you feel about the culture?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the kind of thing. You can even ask these people. You can send an email to HR before any interview asking, what is the kind of cultural alignment that you're looking for in the people who are applying to this job? Before you even apply, you can send that. There's nothing keeping you from it. And then from whatever they respond to you, you can see if that's a match or not.
Yeah, I think
So,
a lot of times in tech, what we are looking at is like, let's say you want to get into data. We are looking at whether or not we know Excel. Do you know
yeah.
R? And we are working on those things. We're working on building those things up.
Hmm.
But I think that's a very
Yeah.
strong message to also look at the culture and is this something that you want to create?
So here's the thing about hard skills, right?
Yeah.
Excel, coding, whatever
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
skills we're talking about. You can do the hard skills
Mm-hmm.
in any place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Any place. Like you can do Excel literally anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You might as well do it somewhere that you're going to wake up and feel excited to go to work to.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. Or you can go and feel miserable the entire day, not because the company is bad, but because you're misaligned. Because I am sure that in every company in the world, there will be people happy and unhappy about the culture,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have a very confusing recruiting process that's not based on culture.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. I feel like, especially on early on projects, right? Sometimes you just need someone with the expertise, and you cannot afford value based recruitment. I understand that argument. I personally think it's bullshit
Mm-hmm.
because as an entrepreneur, you can figure things out. You don't have to do anything perfect. If you're in a startup phase of your whatever it is that you're doing, business project, you're starting up. It's not like you're gonna code Facebook levels of like complexity.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's like you can afford to find the people that you want to work with. Even so, if you're going to become a CEO, you're going to have to recruit people. You might as well start early.
Mm-hmm. So
You might as well.
yeah, so recruitment is actually a two-way process.
It is. It is. And that's the piece that people forget. They think, oh my God, I can't ask anything because otherwise they're going to think, I don't know, they're not going to hire me. And that's not true. Usually, when you show up and you have questions, mature leveled questions, that's when you become a very interesting candidate because you're not just here for the money. You're here because you actually want to work somewhere
Mm-hmm.
that you are aligned with.
Yeah, and you're showing confidence in your values.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so I know we are a little bit over time already, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I asked a lot of questions on the things that I wanted to ask you about and relearn from you. Is there anything else that you want to add before we end the podcast?
I think I just want to end with a kind reminder that take your chances.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're in your 20s or even earlier on in your career. If you can, of course, like if you're starving, go figure that out. Sure, but if you can do projects and learn and give yourself the space to do things for the sake of, yeah, I want to do that project, let me do that. Or I want to apply to this job, let's see how. So something else, apply for interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Do interviews. Think about it as like meeting people. You don't have to go for every one of your interviews with all of the things like, oh my God, and this is the job of my life. Learn the fact that like the more people you know, the more interviews you do, the more you're going to even find out what is aligned with you.
Mm-hmm.
So use those opportunities to help yourself know more about the market, know more different types of companies, and even find out how you react to different questions. So all of those are opportunities, and maybe you find like the love of your life of jobs and company and like you want to work there forever. Like, I don't know. Very unlikely, right? Because the younger you are, the more likely you are to shift companies around a lot in your career. But I think there is something about it that is very valuable in understanding what's going on. So you don't feel like you're a victim of the system or whatever people bullshit they tell themselves. I feel like there's something very empowering about knowing the reality around companies around the world. And, I think my final note, kind reminder is for you to be very selfish, meaning that, like, if you know what you want, go for that. Go for it. And of course, in every relationship, you adjust things, but never compromise on your values. Never. Because the price for that is probably going to be your health. And if you're not healthy, you cannot work. So that's a very problematic, kind of complicated situation. So yeah, I feel like be selfish in the sense of like, of course, I'm not saying you should manipulate, exploit anyone. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, keep your integrity alive and whole that's not the place you need to negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
You can negotiate other things in your life, but your integrity and values are the things that are going to keep you together and are going to make you thrive wherever you work, whatever kinds of projects you do. So be selfish in that way. Regard and guard and keep that safe as much as you can as you're deciding to go into a project or a company or a job or any kind of opportunity, because that's the thing that's going to make you want to talk about what you did afterwards. And that's the most valuable thing, not just for interviews, but for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for you to be enthusiastic talking about something, you need to be there completely. You cannot be negotiating your values just to do your job.
Yeah.
So remember to keep that safe, being selfish in that way. And I can tell you for sure that the likability of you thriving is going to be 90% higher. I promise you. So being selfish in that way can actually be the one factor that's going to help you be successful in whatever you do.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you so much, Helen, for sharing your wisdom with all of us. So that is all that we have for today. I'm gonna end the recording.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone.